Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth annual New Jersey Youth Transitions Conference. My name is April DePietro. I'm the Community Resource Director with the Camden County Care Management Organization. Happy to be here, and we're thrilled to have you here with us today. We're excited to introduce our wonderful presenters. Josh Godown is going to be leading his panel, and they're going to be discussing Supports Coordination Agency. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, April. Super excited to be here and discuss these very, very important topics that we're going to chat about today a little bit. Before I dive into everything, I'd really like to take a minute and allow the panelists a couple of seconds to introduce themselves. Just name and agency you're working for. That would be great. Chelsea, you want to start it off?
I'm Chelsea Martin. I am the owner and one of the supervisors of Navigation Support Coordination. We serve Ocean, Monmouth, and Mercer County.
Perfect. Thank you. Next. Anybody?
I'm Sara Eichner. I'm from Bridges Supports Coordination, and we support most of the counties in the northern region.
I'm Ciara McClinton. I am a support coordinator from Values into Action, and we are statewide and in Pennsylvania.
My name is Valeree Henderson. I work for Keeping Independent Services and Supports. We serve most of central New Jersey, and I'm a support coordination supervisor. I've been in this industry for about 6 years now.
I'm Christine Klaus, and I work for Neighbours, Inc., and we also are statewide.
Perfect. Thank you all. So today we're going to dive into some topics that all the panelists have encountered at one point or another in discussing transition with families that are coming into the adult world. The topics were not only discovered through natural conversations, but also through polls that were completed in social media and just in conversations with families. So the two main topics that we're going to discuss today are services and supports as people transition into the adult world, what's available, how to access them, stuff of that nature. And the second topic is going to be legal services. There was a lot of inquiry as far as what the adult world looks like legal wise once people age into the adult world. So let's dive into the first topic, coordination of services. What key services and supports are available for people as they enter the adult world, and how are they accessed? Somebody want to, Sarah?
The services are accessed in the adult world by registering with the Division of Developmental Disabilities. Usually you do have to have Medicaid. And once that's completed, you have your, you do the intake paperwork with DDD. I know if you were involved in the younger side of it, it's a shortened application. But once you complete all of that, you take an NJCAT, which is a New Jersey assessment tool, and you answer questions about the person's abilities. When you're doing this NJCAT, you have to think of the person on their worst day. I'm sure that I hope that you have, the people listening have additional training on the NJCAT. If not, we can answer any questions about that. But once that's completed, you do have to work with a support coordination agency. Support coordinators are the first step into accessing services. So it's always a great idea to call support coordination agencies, choose an agency, choose a second, have a backup agency, so you're not auto-assigned. I mean, it's not the worst thing if you get auto-assigned, but it's always best to do that research on the support coordination agency that you want to work with, because we are kind of the first step in navigating you to these services. Once you choose a support coordination agency, we will come to your house and do another intake with you, but this intake's a little bit different. It's all about the person. It's person-centered. We get to know the individual, their likes, their interests, what they want to do, what their goals are, what their outcomes are, what their long-term plan is. And I know that that could be a scary question for someone also. So even just understanding the person, and then that's how we connect them with the appropriate services based on their likes and their interests. It should never just be a, here's providers, like, you know, it really should be personalized. The person should be in doing the decision making with the team. But there's a range of providers. It has definitely grown a lot in the last, you know, 5 years. There's so many good providers out there. So it's really key to work with a support coordinator so they can, you know, understand the goals and the to match you with services. That's kind of like a broad answer to the question.
Okay.
I think once you establish that relationship with a support coordination agency, your support coordinator is your right-hand person, right? So you really want to build a really great relationship with them so that they really understand the individual's needs and wants. And I think that's the key to success.
Perfect. Thank you both. Anybody want to add to that?
I completely agree with your support coordinator being, you know, your first line defense, your right-hand man for sure, connecting you to all those services. But you know, don't forget about some of the natural generic services as well that are out there, and they do have Medicaid, so there's a lot through the MCOs. And I feel like a lot of families forget that that's even an option, that's a resource, but it's a resource, it's really valuable. You know, PPP is a program that's available through that. You know, also, hopefully the schools are preparing you for this, but SSI, as soon as they turn 18, like making sure you get that all set up. You know, it's outside of kind of our services, but also a very important element that you want to make sure that you get established at that transition or before that transition stage. BBRS is another one, but again, some schools connect you to that, some don't, and that's another thing your support coordinator can also help you with.
Perfect. Just asking real quick, you mentioned natural and generic resources. Can we just dive into that for 2 seconds and give a broader explanation of what that is for those listening that may not?
So I can give you a real life example of how we use
Sure.
natural services. Recently, we have an individual who's taking a computer certification class through DVR, and we went to the library, and we were just helping him get a library card. But through going to the library and, you know, talking to people, we met someone who works at the library who also took that class and said, "Oh, if you need help, like, let me know. I'm here." You know, they exchanged numbers. So instead of using a tutor through the budget, he's now working with this gentleman at the library when he needs help with something because he took the same class. So that's just, you know, I feel like libraries have amazing services and natural services, free services. That's like, so it's very robust services at the library. Sometimes I go to work at the library and I'll just like learn something new. So that's one example.
Okay.
I also encourage people to look to their counties in which they live in. There are a lot of supports through the counties that are great for, you know, adventures, as we could call them. Lots of great classes, lots of great you know, get-togethers with people of all walks of life. So that's a really great resource to look toward.
Yeah, and even smaller, your actual township that you live in, a lot of times, like go down to town hall and see what they have. A lot of them even have newspapers they put out, but nobody really gets them. They're not even aware. So just go down there, ask questions, and I'm sure they can provide a lot of resources.
And those newspapers are all at the library.
Yes.
Perfect. Anybody else?
Just to jump in, even for a few more natural generic resources, if you have any local YMCAs or your rec centers, if for someone that is looking for more recreational pursuits, you know, those would be some good resources as well.
Okay, perfect. So how can we assist the folks that we work for and the young adults aging into the system to make good choices, right? Everybody's faced with different choices, especially, you know, as they age into the system, the adult system, and adult world, the choices are going to be different, right? So how can we educate folks and guide people to make the right choices surrounding, you know, maybe like getting a job or furthering their education or living on their own?
I think we have to remember that the right choice for them may not be the right choice for all of us. And so we have to let them take the reins and really kind of take a look at what they really want to try. Just like all of us have done in life, we've tried things and maybe it didn't work out. So we have to allow our individuals that we support to be able to have the same life experience that we have.
I agree, Sarah. I tell my folks all the time, you know, I'd rather ask and see if everything is okay, if this is what you want, and get a no than to not try it at all.
And I think
I love that.
it's important to teach decision-making skills, right? Because a lot of times you're 18, you're 21, you may not really know how to make decisions because everything was decided for you. So maybe finding self-advocacy classes, working, having parents start letting their sons or their daughters make more decisions and see how that goes. See, like, get a baseline, because sometimes we meet with families and they really have never been asked some questions before. So, I mean, maybe start just like seeing their decision-making process, where they're at with that, and see what kind of, if they need more self-advocacy, if they need, to be explained why something's a right or wrong choice. Like, I know it sounds kind of, I'm putting it very simple, but when we go to meet with families that are new graduates, sometimes we are met with, like, we're asking, what do you want to do? What are your likes? What are your interests? And they don't know. So like teaching those decision-making skills and then kind of catering them to make good or better decisions,
I think going along with that the person-centered planning tool is a huge area for us to be able to build that relationship with the individual. And the relationships, I'm going back to that again, building relationships with your individuals and your families is key. You have to be able to navigate some challenging conversations. Sometimes mom or dad knows what they want the individual to do. And other time, and at the same point, that individual does not want to do any of those activities or services or things like that. And so that becomes a challenging conversation for us, right? So we're trying to make the individual live their best life and guide the families along for the adventure. So
that is, yes, that's well put.
Okay, so what, kind of combining the last two questions, when we're talking about like continuing education, stuff of that nature, what resources would you recommend to a family, or what resources are available for folks in looking to continue their education?
So I think there's many options. You can go the DVRS route. So that's the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services, where they can sort of guide you through that process. There's exploration of, what you want to do. What do your local community colleges have? What do, the local New Jersey colleges have? And try to explore that way. And then, navigate that with, your family, your support coordinator, and try and decipher what you want to do. There is a way, if DVRS is being utilized for other supports and services, there is a way to have classes covered through the budget through certain colleges, right? So obviously the first step is completing that FAFSA form, just like everybody else going to college, right? So once that we get that decision back from FAFSA, most times we're seeing our individuals, their college courses are being covered through grants. At some point we have to look at the financial piece, and maybe, yes, it does have to go into the budget, but the budget does allow for that. So college can definitely be covered through, those two avenues.
Yeah, and DVRS is more than just, can be more than just job coaching and trial work experience. If someone has work experience and they want to go into like a technical school, we've had individuals that went to DVRS and had that covered. It really depends on just knowing DVRS and knowing what options you have with them and seeing where the individual is. If it align, the individual has to want it also. So DVRS is a great resource. You just have to know kind of what they offer and what you want, what the individual wants. And it has to be like, realistic. Like, you can't go into DVRS and say you want to be a movie star. They're gonna say that's not, what do they say? It's not a job that's in demand. Something like that. But DVRS is a great resource. But yes, the DDD budget can also help with job coaching or classes, readiness classes, but even like the county. So the county has technical schools. Grab a brochure. They're at the library. Grab a brochure and look through it and see if there's anything, of interest.
Just to add with DBRS, they are a great resource. We've even had them, chip in and pay for certain things when it comes to going to college. Like we have a individual who is in a college program and they've helped paid for some of like room and board, food, stuff like that. So you wouldn't think of DBRS at first thought of it being helpful for that. So yeah, but it really is a great resource. And they do help with things like that. Also, if they're not quite ready for secondary, but they still want to continuing education, maybe in a certain area, there are a lot of providers out there that are gearing just classes like that. I'm seeing more and more now. I know Monmouth County is a huge one for that. Hopefully we start seeing more in other counties. It is another option.
Yeah, and volunteering can really build confidence and get, a good gauge on what the individual is interested in. If, they're starting from scratch. So trying to find those volunteer opportunities, and going from there also.
And also just kind of piggybacking off of using the county, the technical schools and whatnot, you can have some of those classes paid for through goods and service through your budget. So that's another option.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to talk a little bit about, there are some services that are vendor provided services through goods and services, who will take a risk on those non-traditional jobs. You had mentioned a movie star before. Well, there are some service vendors who will work towards whatever the individual wants to work. They take their strengths and they really work in what they want to do. I've seen lots of people have YouTube channels and various social media outlets of that. There are some great let me back up, service vendors who offer classes based on various different topics. I mean, you name it and it's probably out there. They're all over the state, but services can be provided virtually and in person. So it's helpful for the individuals to really live their dreams.
Yeah, DDD, the budget's great for that individual type of. DVRS is just not going to really fund a move, a career in Hollywood or, acting, I don't think. But DDD, the budget is more used for individual stuff like that, to clarify.
Okay. So in talking with families and working with folks that are transitioning into the adult system, they spend a lot of time as kids and young adults making friends, right? And I've heard from a lot of families, one of the big topics is, what happens when I become an adult? How do I make friends? Where's that social outlet? So what can we do as support coordinators to help families and people supported navigate the social relationships and some of the other barriers that come with the adult system or being an adult? That's not really a system thing. It's just, it's a difference in age. And it's a little harder when you're older.
I mean,
oh, I'm sorry. You can go ahead,
no,
Sarah.
go ahead, Ciara.
As an adult, making friends is a little difficult. I mean, making new friends is a little difficult, but community integration, just being, trying your best to be involved in the community, having the access to the services and whatnot, you're gonna meet people. So networking becomes very important, during this time.
We also have to identify whether the individual wants to find friends who are like them, or if they want to find friends who are not like them. We need to find activities to help them engage in those sorts of, I just blanked, sorry.
Yeah, and they're engaging in this like similar activities that they like.
Yeah.
Like that's how you meet friends, right? You usually are attracted to people that are a bit similar to you. So if you're taking a class, an art class, and there's other people in art, it gives you something to talk about, right? So I mean, there's ways to safely do it. Like there's websites, that you can meet other people. I know a big thing is like having a relationship and having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That could be tough for someone to, it's tough for anybody to, put yourself out there and do it, and especially do it safely. So I think that working with like a community, like a support staff, may to potentially like help you, because it's not it's someone that you want to trust, maybe someone that's the same age as the person. And the support staff can help facilitate those friendships or facilitate those opportunities to find the friendships.
Absolutely.
Because I know I'm more confident to meet other people if I have someone with me sometimes, So through maybe a good support staff can help the person feel more comfortable when they go out to, engage in conversations and make new friends.
That's great. I really like the networking too. Networking is super important. And there's so many, I could list off a bunch. There's a lot of groups out there that you can join and be a part of, and that have a lot of resources out there. So really just finding those resources, connecting to others to get more resources. I have seen a lot more social groups popping up too, like providers that provide social groups. So just look for them. You'll find something if that's really something that, the individual wants.
Yeah.
The division also offers peer networking meetings quarterly. If you go to the Office of Self-Directed Education, it's led by Ashley Ritchie. We at Neighbours, one of my roles is a coordinator of mentors and self-advocacy, and we hold peer networking meetings where we have like different topics. And anybody in the community is welcome to join these meetings. Everybody has something to learn from one another. But I would recommend taking a look at least the ARC's information on some cyber safety. They do have we even have them on as a guest speaker, because that's an important thing in today's day and age. But sometimes when you go to the peer networking meetings, you get to see what other people are doing out there and perhaps the services they're using that you may never even know about. So if you can, check out the division's website, the Office of Education on Self-Direction.
That's such a good resource.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all. Any last tidbits of information before we transition over to the next topic?
I just want parents and individuals to know that there is a whole world after, school ends. It's became really great in the last, 7 years. There's a lot of services. The opportunity to have goods and service. Goods and service is like if there's a provider that isn't like Medicaid, that isn't registered with Medicaid, like you could still use it, like a gym. There's like art classes. There's if someone wanted to do Pilates, it has to relate back to, the person and their interests. But it opens up a whole world for people and enhancing like their goals and making sure that they're getting to their goals. There's, of course, there's day programs, there's support staff is a big thing, like community-based support, someone that would come to work with the individual on things in the house, like, you know, laundry, showing, like, making sure the individual is working on those independent living skills so they can prepare themselves to move out if that's one of their goals. Cooking, because, you know, a parent can say something to their child and it goes, you know, they're not listening. But if a support staff comes in and it's someone different than the adult, they typically respond a bit differently. So there's a lot of great support staff out there, but there's a lot of services. And a big thing is make sure that you research your support coordination agency. There's a lot of support coordination agencies out there. When the time is, when it's your time, you will get a list of support coordination agencies. You can call them. You can ask about, you know, you can ask them anything you want. They're on the Bog Center. There's a guide to what to ask a support coordination agency when you call them, like when you interview them. So the Bog Center has a lot of great family resources and guides that helps prepare you for transition. Definitely take a look at that, but definitely make sure you know what support coordination agency you would like to go with and have it, you know, one or two, because sometimes the first one is closed and then you have a second choice also.
Perfect. Thank you.
Gosh, can I add one more thing, which actually got me thinking about it? I think one of the best things that somebody can do is a family member in particular. And by the way, I am one of them. I have a son who does receive DDD services. And I've been doing this for about 14 years now and seen all kinds of different programs. But I can tell you that one of the most helpful things I found with the families that I've worked with through the years is to connect them with other parents. That is one of the best resources because oftentimes as family members, you know, Chelsea couldn't have said it better. Your kid's not going to listen to you, and that's normal. Whether they're developmentally disabled or not, let me tell you, it's so normal. But you definitely want to kind of learn from one another. So again, yes, I am plugging it. It's the Office of Self-Directed Education through the division holds county-wide family networking meetings where you have families that come in with all kinds of cool connections, resources, and ideas. So when we look at like natural supports, there is one of your natural supports. They're part of your circle. You have your support coordinator, your, you know, any family members, the providers that you might use, and yes, providers, and also the people in your community. But I think it's really important to recognize that when your son or daughter, and I'm talking to the family members, or better yet, you yourself, leave high school, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to learn from other people. You definitely, because I'm sure they're going to come up with stuff. And you may even make friends that way. Moms and dads, sister, brother, you name it. And we all could use that.
Yeah.
Support is a great tool. So I think that that's an amazing resource. I just wanted to add one more thing. Going back to goods and services, if it doesn't exist, you can make it exist. As a support coordinator, I have gone to many local businesses who my individuals want to work with, but maybe they can't afford it or various different things. But I've helped people enroll as vendors so that we can support our individuals where they are.
That's a great point. Thanks, Sarah. So the next topic is a little bit different than the first, right? So the next topic is going to be legal services. So legal services that are available, and how is the adult system different than the first, 21 years? So the first question and the first area that we can talk about are what legal areas should adults and their families know about when entering the adult world? This could be guardianship, this could be supported decision-making, it could be anything to help or better the person supported in making decisions or any legal matters.
I'm going to put in the chat a link. It's I think it's called specialneedsalliance.org. If you go on there, they have a list of special needs attorneys that you can check out. You can click right on, brings you right to their website. When it comes to guardianship, there are different kinds of guardianship. You have, for example, plenary. That's when you're guardian over all decisions, medical, health, financial, the state and well-being. You can do partial. Usually an attorney will talk you through that. And they'll also should go over the options, for example, like shared decision making or even power of attorney. It all depends on the person in general. And I'm sorry, I just drew a blank, just like Sara. Don't feel bad. Josh, can you refresh the question again? Sorry.
Sure. I mean, you nailed most of it. I think you actually answered the whole question. It was just about, what's available to families as their loved ones, age and transition into the adult system, for decision making, whether that's guardianship, whether that's supported decision making, and how are those accessed?
Yeah, it's you typically go through an attorney. For that. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, typically with the guardianship process, though, I do want to add a couple things. One is if you're a family member applying for guardianship over your son or your daughter, let's say a mom or dad, what will typically happen is you have to hire an attorney to declare your loved one incompetent, but your loved one will also be appointed an attorney. So it's something to consider because their rights need to be protected as well. So that is something to expect. There is some responsibilities that come with guardianship. There's an organization, there's a couple organizations. I was just thinking, sorry, going back to connections, the councils, the developmental disability councils. It's good to kind of learn a little bit about them because those are usually people with lived experience coming to the table and will have other resources for you. They may even say, hey, this is the attorney I use, or there's also the option of and I apologize if you can hear construction, so I'm so sorry, everybody. But one of the other options you can have, because guardianship can be costly. You have to pay for your attorney, and sometimes you have to pay for their attorney too, as ironic as that can be. But one of the things you can do is file for guardianship, what they call pro se. There are some websites out there. I'm not sure if I can put anything up in the chat, but there are websites out there where you can learn how to do it pro se yourself. So you go in and you're kind of representing, and you follow their guidelines. That is the cheapest way to do it. So there are many different options. And always remember, one day at a time. I hope I'm not sounding overwhelming.
No.
Valeree did put it in the chat, I believe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Valeree.
I also, I encourage my families to think really clearly about guardianship. It's not for everyone, and it does come with a lot of responsibility. And I know that everybody wants their child to be protected. But sometimes with that guardianship, it does take away the individual's right to make choices, sign off on their own documents, and grow a little bit. So I always encourage people to really think and make it a whole family choice, if that's possible, because it's a really long process. It's an expensive process. And I don't want you to get to the end and then your child tells the attorney, no, I don't want this. So I encourage that. Really good communication as a family is important.
Yeah, just adding to that, like you said, having that conversation, having those difficult conversations, it's hard for us. We have to navigate that too, right? Especially having that backup plan. That's a big part of it. And, you can have guardianship and try and plan for everything, and then life doesn't always work out. And then what's your plan B too? Do you have a plan B after guardianship? Because eventually you're going to need it, if not today. So that's something definitely to consider. And maybe it doesn't have to be guardianship. I think someone brought up power of attorney. Like that's something, an easier route that you can go, and it can be just financial or just medical or have a healthcare proxy. So there are other options than just going the guardianship route. So just I shared some resources. Just use your resources, do your research. I don't know everything about the legalities of everything because it is so complicated, but I think having those conversations, finding out really what you want, and then doing the research to get you there.
And just to bring it back to support coordination and guardianship, and someone who's their own guardian in regards to support coordination, when we create the individualized service plan and we make revisions, the individual is required to sign the plan, even if they have a guardian. I mean, it's preferred for the individual and the guardian to sign the plan. But if the individual is their own guardian, they sign the plan. It's important that, families often think that they can just sign the plan because they can sign the plan. But if the person is their own guardian, they have to sign the plan themselves. If the individual has a guardian, then the guardian has to sign, and it's really encouraged that the individual signs also. And every time we make a change that requires a budget change, or really any change, we have to get the ISP signed for that change to be effective, or to take effect.
Perfect. That's actually a really good segue into our last question. Before we open it up, I'd like to do like 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So the last question is really just going to kind of bring it back around to the differences between the educational system and the adult system. Like, what can families expect difference-wise between the two systems, or the two areas?
In school, basically it's all inclusive, right? You have a right to an education and everything that comes along with that education. So, OT, PT, speech, everything. It encompasses everything. Maybe after school care, stuff like that. When you get to the adult system, I like to say it's kind of a la carte. So you kind of pick and choose the services that you need the most, and you have to go from there. So yeah, it's very different, and it's kind of, I find a lot of families find it overwhelming, because now they do have to worry about things that they never had to think about, like that after school care. Like if you choose a day program, many families struggle with, well, what do I do with, my child from day program to when I can get home from work? But there are resources for that. There are stuff that we can work out in the budget and natural supports that really help with that. So most families figure it out, but it can be overwhelming at first when you're trying to get there.
Yeah, and if the individual is going to a day program and they're used to a one-on-one at school, there's usually not a one-on-one at day programs. They're in a certain ratio, and so it's not like a one-on-one situation at a day program. So that is a big difference from if someone had a one-on-one in school, like a behavioralist at school, or someone that helped them with that. That's usually not provided at a day program. I know there's certain circumstances, of course, but I see that as a big change for people who are transitioning. And there's no one-on-one on like transportation either. If you're taking an agency bus to get to a day program, and every agency is different, but generally there's not really one-on-ones at program.
I think one of the biggest challenges across the state, and correct me if I'm wrong, because if you can find this in other areas of the state, teach me your ways. Transportation is also a difficult thing to navigate for the families. When you go to school, transportation is all encompassed in that entitlement, right? And so when we get to the adult world, some of the counties are, a little less densely populated. And so transportation can be quite hard to find, but things are opening up a bit more now. Several years ago, it was a lot harder, but we are seeing some assistance with that. So don't be alarmed, but it's out there.
Perfect. Any last minute comments about anything that we went over before we have about 20 minutes for Q&A, 15 to 20 minutes. So any last comments?
I have, oh Lord, can you hear the construction? I apologize. Nobody can hear that. Okay, thank gosh. So, oh my goodness. Josh, I got another plug, if it's okay with you.
Go for it.
There's an organization called the Collaborative of New Jersey. They hold meetings every other month, and I highly recommend anybody at this conference attend those meetings. You will meet other families. You will hear other stories. You will even see support coordinators on there. As a matter of fact, the one of them that's on here right now with us, I got to meet her through the collaborative meeting. And it was, so it's a really great organization. Sorry, Josh, it's just, I think it's super helpful. I did see in the chat as well, somebody wants to know how to reach some of us. I'm happy to put my email in there, but Amy, I'm not sure how that's okay, but you can put my email up there. But I would highly recommend, even if somebody did put a link for the collaborative in there. So I highly recommend that you try to get, and they're Zoom and they're fun. That's all.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's a really good resource. We're going to have a lot of really good conversations coming up this next year. I don't want to dive too much into that right now, but feel free to reach out to the collaborative to inquire and ask questions. So, last 15-ish so minutes, I would love to open it up for question and answers. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask, or you can type it in the chat, whatever works best for you.
So
Thank you guys. I just want to shout and plug the collaborative. I did put it in the chat. I want you guys to know that they host the self-direction conference every year. This time it's going to be in person on October 31st and November 1st. And I want to give kudos to Josh and team, including Chrissy, Claus, and Values into Action, who host and the collaborative combos are led by Josh and Cherry at Neighbours Inc. And to Chrissy's point, they are phenomenal. The engagement and the conversation around self-direction and overcoming barriers, everybody needs to be there. It's an amazing place to connect to people and families. And there's tickets available now for that conference, and I put the link in the chat for you guys. And Chrissy, to answer your question, yes, please do put your personal contact information that people, not personal, but your work contact info, so people can connect with you. I've linked in the beginning of your presentation to all of your websites in the chat, but if people want to connect with you personally, please feel free to put that in there. Thank you. I also tried to keep up with the many resources that you guys shared in this presentation by putting those in the chat, including all of the Family Network meetings, the Office of Education on Self-Directed Services, and I can't remember all the others because there were so many, but they're in the chat when I could keep up with you guys.
I just want to respond to something that's Nat said in the chat about the one-on-ones. I know she said that she can't believe that, some programs don't provide one-on-ones when an individual may have been used to one-on-ones in school. There are, and we ran into this with the family. We had to find a specialized program that was still a great program. They were in the community and they were able to provide more of the one-on-one experience. There are day programs that are that are more maybe behavioral based programs, that they have a behavioralist on staff. They have lower participants. So all programs are different. It's just, I wanted to ensure, I just want to get the point across that just because someone had a one-on-one in school, it doesn't carry over to a day program. But there are day programs that offer more, lower participants or more staffing, or more, specialized programming. a specialized program in behavioral or medical.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Josh, you had mentioned earlier, you were asking the difference between like the youth world and the adult world. And I
Right.
put it in like 4 words in the chat. Youth world is all about entitlement. When you come to the adult world, it's all about eligibility. And one of the things that Chelsea spoke to in regard to the one-on-one support, when you're in the youth world, you get that for your IEP, right? In the adult world, you can hire your own support staff, your own one-on-one. You can do that as I can be the employer of record. Let's say I'm a person with lived experience. I have a disability and I want support staff. I can do that. I can hire my own person. I can be the boss, or I can hire a direct support coordination agency for me that will assign a DSP, a direct support personnel or provider to support me individually. Chelsea, I think you mentioned in the beginning about the NJ CAT, right? And on your, fill that out, thinking about your worst day. That is ultimately going to decide what your person's DDD budget is and how they can spend their money for services and support. And that's why Chelsea's recommending, and everyone is going to say this, think about it on your worst day. If you, for example, they're going to ask, you know, can a person shower or brush their teeth? Well, yeah, but sometimes they might need prompts, right? You want to make sure that you're including that in the NJCAT, because that's going to determine the budget that a person can use for services that will help you to hire your own support staff and maybe self-direct your day so that you can have a day and live a life of your choosing and a life that someone else that doesn't experience a disability would do.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Can I add to that what Amy said? And I think that was phenomenal. I love the difference between entitlement. That was excellent. You couldn't have said that better. You know, one of the things that I want to tell caregivers, when you answer those questions, you want to answer them as if that person just walked in the door today to take care of your kid.
Right.
Because they're not going to know. They're not going to know years and years. I'm working with families through the years. That's one thing I found is that they'll say, oh, yes, they can take a shower. But then like even the support coordinator might dig a little deeper because they have to do more detailed plan writing, right? And that's when I've had a lot of families come back to me and say, oh, my God, I didn't realize how much I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to write it as if you're giving instructions to somebody for the first time.
Yeah, excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point, Chrissy.
And as far as the NJCAT, I'm just going to throw it out there. I always encourage families to take a harder look at that. If their loved one is living on their own or after they start living on their own, because the level of support and the level of need is going to be a little bit different, or it'll be a little more apparent when the supports aren't always around them, the same as they are with families.
Yeah, thank you. Right now, there's no questions in the chat, so we'll give folks a moment to think about if they have anything they want to ask you. But if it's okay with you guys, I have a question. Because I know a lot of times when people come to the adult world, they're confused about what support coordination is and is not. Can you give us maybe a 1-word sentence or a 30-second elevator pitch? What is a support coordinator? What is it that you guys do? Because I know you're magic makers. You make the world go around. But how do we describe that in like a nutshell?
Can I jump in on this one? So, for myself, I guess I can say, and I think it was either Sara or Chelsea that said it earlier, like this is the person that you lean on for everything. And, you know, I tell my folks all the time, you can reach out to me. I don't, you know, whatever question you may have, whether it's about navigating the DDD system, a service that the individual may be looking for, don't be afraid to ask the question, because whether it's yes or no, or I can do this, or it's never going to be I can't do this, it's always going to be let's find out if this is something that we can do. Sara said earlier she's gone into the community and have helped some of these companies and agencies become DDD providers or, you know, vendors, so that there are more accessible services in the community and things that are interesting for the individual. So for me, as an active support coordinator, I'd say that's the person you lean on for everything, you know, whether it's yes, no, maybe, go to them first. You can probably get a direct answer from them. If not, they know who to talk to get the direct answer.
Also, if you think you haven't, like, if you're scared to ask the question, I've probably heard it a million times anyway, so it's not going to shock me. I've had parents cry to me. I've had parents, you know, just describe how awful they feel about the whole everything happening. And, you know, we walk you through it, and we're right there with you. We're navigating that with you, and helping to make sure that your son or daughter or loved one is where they need to be, where they want to be, and living their best life.
We have a really good question in the chat. How much interaction does the support coordinator have with the person supported? You know, how often should they, or how often is it expected that support coordinators, you know, visit families, take phone calls, that sort of thing? Can somebody
Yeah,
guide?
so at first, you're going to be working with your support coordinator a lot. We're going to be meeting with you in your house. We're going to be asking you the questions that we're going to ask you to elaborate on the NJCAT questions. We're going to ask questions about for the person-centered planning tool. We're going to be connecting you with the services. We're going to have you tour the services. We're going to be holding your hand through all of that. So we have a lot of interaction initially to get that plan up and running. You know, we fade away. It's a good thing because, you know, in typical fashion, we fade away. Like we're not talking every day about how this provider went or how that provider went or adding things to the plan. But we are required to do monthly monitoring tools to see like how the person's doing, how everything's going with the vendor, or I'm sorry, the service provider. And that is done on the phone. And then every 3 months, face to face. And then every year, we have the annual meeting again. And we do have to see the person once a year in their home. It's very important.
Thank you for
First,
answering
it's a
that.
lot of interaction because we're working with the person, we're connecting them to services. Then you don't need us as much because hopefully you don't need us as much because everything's going well. But but we're always here no matter what. If you call, you have a question about the provider, we also help facilitate like the conversation. If there's a tricky conversation that you need to have with a provider or a support staff, we're here to help with that conversation. If you don't feel comfortable delivering instructions or communicating something to a provider, like we can do that for you. Like we are kind of like we work for the person. So, but we're mandated to do monthly monitoring calls. Every quarter we do face-to-faces, and then every year we do an annual meeting. Typically it's in the home, doesn't have to be, but once a year we do have to visit the person in the home.
Yeah. I think that was a great question because going back to my original question for you guys, like what is it that a support coordinator does? And I think what happens is there's an expectation of the same services that a person is receiving in the youth world. And just to point out that difference between eligibility and entitlement, when a person is receiving support and services and authorization through a budget, which is very different in the youth world through a care management organization, one of which April represents very well in Camden County, called the CMO, right? CMO is short for, it would be the closest thing we have in the adult world to a support coordination agency. In the youth world, a person is contacted at least once, maybe twice a week. They're visited in their home once a month. They have a child family team meeting going over that plan, their life goal plan and their behavioral and mental health care plan every 3 months. And it's very different and less hands-on once you get to the adult world when you're working with a support coordinator. And I think that comes as sometimes a shock to people, and they're coming in with an expectation of getting that same kind of hand-holding that they get in the youth world. And it's not realistic, and it's also not part of the services with support coordination. So I just wanted to help to clarify that for the differences between adult and youth services for those that may not be aware of that are in the audience right now.
And just to throw in a little bit again, Chelsea mentioned earlier about the individual service plan. So that's something that can be changed at any point during the year. So if there's a service that, the person is interested in adding in or removing or just altering at any point, you have the ability to reach out to the support coordinator and, discuss that and have those changes made. And as Chelsea mentioned earlier, we would just have to go through making sure the signatures and everything are taken care of in order to get the approvals. But you know, your contact with your support coordinator is not just limited to the monthly monitoring or the quarterly in person. You are able to reach out. I make myself available via phone and email, text message, whatever's easiest, at any point during the month. And I make sure that I let my people know that as well. So whether it's just that they want to update me on something that has happened, or, you know, if there are any changes to the service plan, they have that ability to reach out to me as well so that we can get these things accomplished.
Sure. We have another question in the chat. Maybe somebody can jump in on this. What if a person is in a group home and they are not verbal? Should the visit by the support coordinator only be once a year?
I mean, that's the requirement. Obviously, if there are any concerns that things are not being completed, like medical appointments, or if there are things that just, you know, are off, we obviously can do more than one in-home visit, and we will. We're there to support the individual, and if family is aware, or if the individual is having behaviors, because behaviors are communication, right? So you know, the support coordinator should be jumping in and maybe doing an extra home visit just to see what's going on and make sure that everything's happening cohesively.
And if that is something that the families, you know, or the individual would want, then that's not an issue at all. If you would prefer all of the in-person meetings to be at home, you know, that's an option. If you want to meet in the community, just remember that the one annual does have to be at home. So you have options there, you know, even though we have our mandates from DDD that we have to follow, you do still have options as an individual on how this is carried out.
This has been an excellent conversation, but we have to get ready for the next workshop. So I wanted to say thank you to our presenters. Thank you, Josh. Thank you to the rest of the team. We truly appreciate your time and your expertise. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us and being a part of this session. We hope that you learned something valuable and that you feel inspired on your hero's journey. Please stay with us as our next workshop will get started right at 1 o'clock. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Good one.